first thing I like to start because for me I feel it's special to have this together today, because the stories that we know each other for quite a while actually.
Yeah.
It was 2012 when we met first in Sydney Film Festival, when you were presenting your first feature after your several short film and documentaries, Neighboring Sounds, Les Bruits de Récif. And I was showing my first feature-length documentary, Le Sommeil d'Or, Golden Slumbers. And we befriended, obviously, there, spent a couple of days.
Yeah.
I remember we hung out at that time with Colin Trevorrow,
Yes.
an American director who was showing his first feature, who later on, a few years later, I saw the name of in a newspaper being the director of the new remake of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And so for me, of course, I was pretty young. I was 29. First time experiencing traveling with film that year, like traveling around the world. And so going to Sydney for the first time for me was a very strong experience, but exchanging with someone like you, with your background of film criticism before, and that jump that you made into this first feature, it's really cherished memory actually. So since 2012, we've been meeting quite often actually, regularly I would say. 2016, I think the next time was 2016 when you presented Aquarius in competition, and I was showing actually my first feature film, Diamond Island. And then, we had a moment with Sonia Braga, which was very, very strong in my memory as well. And then seeing you in Munich and whatever, and you've been a filmmaker that I admire a lot the work of and look up to a lot. But also through that friendship relationship, asking you advice sometimes, even like not only like filmmaker advice, but very basic advice of how to bring babies in plane when you travel to festival. So anyway. I feel very connected to your work and so always excited to hear news from you. Unfortunately, I couldn't have the chance to watch the last one that you presented this year that I was dying to see, but it didn't happen. But I just wanted to start by kind of sharing a bit of that personal connection and story.
Yeah, I think what you just did there is really beautiful, actually, Davy. When filmmakers meet, they follow parallel lines, parallel paths. I was here last year when you showed the Return to Seoul, and to be part of that premiere and that first screening was very emotional, because everything came back in terms of the years we've known each other, and I hope we keep meeting not only with new films but with just sharing new ideas, and it's I think it's a great thing. You were in Cannes this year with as a jury member, which is one of the most interesting challenges of working on film. You get invited to look at other films, and it's quite an exercise, physical exercise and mental exercise also.
I can testify, I can witness.
The physical exercise is because it's just not natural to watch 19 films in 9 days. It's not natural. We were not made to subject ourselves to so many images and sounds in 19 days. And it's also very emotional. But it's something that we do sometimes. I was in a jury last month at Vision du Réel.
Yeah.
And we saw 13 films.
Yeah.
And that came back as, wow, this is not natural. But I like it.
I have to confess that although maybe it's not natural, when the first lockdown came and I was locked in Amsterdam in a 30-meter square studio with my partner, I did watch 3 films a day for 3 months, and that was the closest thing to happiness I can think of, except for having a baby recently. So maybe it's not natural, but I feel very grateful to have this unnatural moment to be obliged to watch so many films.
Me too. That's why I keep accepting these invitations.
One thing I always wanted to ask you actually is it's not common, I would say, out of France that someone who used to have a career as a film critic become a director. But I say out of France because in France it's very, very common. Of course, the French New Wave was their history was there, and since the French New Wave, a lot of film critics became director. I think of Olivier Assayas, for example, Nicolas Saada, Yann Gonzalez, a lot of them actually. And I was never a film critic, but I used to write a bit in an amateur level and then be surrounded by film critics. And And there is Godard always saying that for him there is no difference between being a film critic and making film, and he says that when he was making film criticism, he was already making film. I'm just curious to know what's your take on that, having had this experience but not being a French director whose normal heritage is to turn from film critic to director. Do you understand what Godard means in your particular case, or do you think it's very different?
No, very much so. I agree. In fact, yeah. When you refer to a profession related to cinema in Portuguese, in the Portuguese language, you say, I make cinema. But it's often referred to making films. When you say, I make cinema, it usually means I make films. But I have used many times, I make cinema when I was a film critic. Because in my mind, I was already making cinema. Because it's just a series of developing ideas that you have about cinema, and both in writing about film and in making films, you want to go like this in a conversation. You know, the problem with both, in fact, is sometimes I had the assignment of writing about a film. And I had to write about that film because that's how things go. But I did not, in a conversation, I would not normally have said that to write about that film because I had nothing to say about that film. But then the critic has to find a way of expressing himself or herself about that one film. When you set out to make a film, you have to be very much sure that you have something to say. You know, you might even lose yourself, which I think is also part of the process. But in both situations, you are putting your hand up and saying, I might have something to say about this situation. So, I think they are very close, in fact. And it doesn't really surprise me that many film critics have become filmmakers because it's just a natural flow.
But it's very uncommon out of France, honestly. I can think of one American director, for example, who used to be film critic. And then you can see it in American cinema, the fact that there is a real separation between the two, I feel. It may be a less theoretical approach and more of a storytelling approach. But interestingly for me, the storytelling approach, or at least the jump into fiction without too much theory, I feel it in your cinema, although we can always see the theory, so we can always see the ghost of the film critic in your work, but it's first is movie emotions, I would say, in front of the, on
I
screen.
have a question, because I'm here this year with a documentary, and when we met, you had a documentary on, which is basic archive, talking about archive and using archive. And one thing that I found incredibly strong about working, not with a script and actors and camera setups like I did with my other films. This film was generated by images I found. And I really love that because it's almost like the film builds itself. Well, it doesn't, because I'm the one who becomes interested in that image, but not that one, and I bring it to the film. But but you have also done fiction, of course, with a script and with actors, and you decided where the camera was. And when I found a lot of the footage, I didn't have much choice other than falling in love with what I saw and deciding not to use it in the film. And I think it's a beautiful thing to work with archives. And of course, I want to go back to fiction, but I want to make another film out of footage that can be found. Do you feel like this?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because, and it's funny because I haven't seen your last film, but I remember clearly the opening of Aquarius with the photos, actually.
Yes.
Right? And
one of those photos is in the new film also.
Which remind me, I don't know why, but suddenly like the beginning of We Own the Night as well, with the photos and
big reference
for your film.
For Neighboring Sounds.
Okay. Oh yeah, cool. But actually, my first documentary, Golden Slumbers, was built on the choice of not showing archives. Mm-hmm. If you remember, it was about the lost Cambodian cinema, and then there is nothing to show. So how do you? So I was very interesting, I will say, theoretically speaking, about this approach, but it's not just theory, it's a reality of when there is no image to show, like how can you still I was say talk about it, but it's not talk about it. How can you still approach that missing image, like the missing picture, the film of Retipan? I think for post-genocidal film, it's always a question, and so and but at the end, eventually, I show some archive. But for me, my reflection to that, but it's really linked to the first film I made, was the danger of. Not the danger, the responsibility of using archives when you start to love them, which of course you do when you work on a material and on history, and a history that haven't been told. And then the responsibility of how can I show it to the audience for that archive to be effective, which I will translate into staying with the audience. And the risk of, in a world, as you say, as a jury, I watch 3 to 4 films a day, but people also watch images, like hundreds of images a day or thousands of them. So will my very cherished archive be just one of the images in the daily flow and will be immediately forgotten? And how to create the condition for the audience to love the archive as much as I love it? That was really the challenge, and my answer was not showing them, to playing with the frustration like a Tarantino film where you don't give what we all expect, and at the end showing it so that maybe when it appears, you really see it. It's not just passing through, right? So it's but it came from the topic of the subject of the film, which is the missing pictures, actually. But so interesting, yeah.
Yeah, Brazilian archives are quite, they are not complete at all. We have a big problem with preservation in Brazil. And many times I was looking for something which I never found. But then I found something else, and that became an element for the film.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as radical as a post-genocidal society, but there is a kind of disastrous crisis in the way we keep our images in my country. You know?
Yeah, of course, I can relate that very much, not only in Cambodia, but in Southeast Asia, and there is a lot of work to try to preserve, protect, and restore. I was thinking of something else also when you were talking, because I mentioned that the second time we met was 2016 when you showed Aquarius, but that's not true. Actually, it was in 2014 when I was showing my short film in Directors Fantasmas, and you came as a producer for the Brazilian short film by Tiao and...
Oh, Sem Coração, Tiao and Nara Normande.
And Nara Normande, and you were the producer of that film.
Yeah.
And I also am a producer in Cambodia, but I think in 2014 I was kind of thinking I should stop producing to focus on making my film, which I did in 2016, and then in 2017, I decided to try to do both, which I'm still doing, and producing young Cambodian directors. I never thought of that, but I'm wondering how influential somehow just seeing you with younger directors from Brazil and like pushing them and accompanying them was not maybe something that also affected me in a moment that I was to make a choice and finally decided to do both. And so you're still producing, right?
Well, yes, the main producer is always Emily, but I get involved and...
Your wife,
yeah, it's Emily Lesclos, the producer. I sometimes don't know really. I think it's tricky because I'm also a filmmaker, and I'm not the one who will be telling other filmmakers what to do and how to do it. And of course, I can give my feedback, but sometimes, depending on who it is, it might feel as if it's a little uncomfortable, or maybe it's too hands-off. And the role of the producer for me is mysterious and beautiful at the same time. And I love to help whenever help is needed. You know, that's basically what I do. So yeah, we are involved with a number of films. And I'm very proud of the work that's been done in these films. But I'm not sure I'm the kind of producer who would really get into an argument with a filmmaker and say that this is not the editing. And
for sure.
So this is what you want? All right. I don't think it would be the right way for the film, but it's fine. I'm completely support you. Or, I mean, this is brilliant. It's incredible, but I never really want to change. I don't feel I'm not comfortable with that, with the use of that power, you know.
Yeah,
and many producers are they push very hard, and I find it complicated, you know.
Yeah, I have a great relationship myself with my producer Charles Vincent, but when I'm a producer myself, it's something I try to be very aware of, especially to be a director who has a bit more experience than the people you produce, so it's the same than you. But my philosophy, it's to not hang out on the shooting too much, because the shooting is such an intense moment that your presence can be a bit of pressurizing for the director. But I try to be involved as much as I am needed in the writing and in the editing when we have more time to discuss and I can understand, but always to the defense of the film and the director. I don't remember having argued with my directors, but at least that's when I dare to be involved more. But on the shooting, I try to step back, because I think sometimes it can be over pressurizing, or just weird, maybe your position and stuff like that.
Exactly.
I have a last question, which is so random, but it's very technical, so maybe filmmakers relate to that. Is when I think of your film, I have an image, and this image is white. It means I have a background of white color. I guess it comes from the architecture in Brazil, but still, and I always discuss with my DP, who always ask me to avoid white walls because we can't lead them, and then it become like difficult and blah 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 at night, but sometimes also at day. And when I think of Neighboring Sounds, Bacaro, Aquarius, I see the white walls behind, like that's a strong thing, and I see a lot of sun, obviously Brazil, but even there is a different way of dealing with that very strong sun, which in Cambodia also is the same struggle. So I'm just curious of, how do you see that aspect, the white walls in your film? How do you embrace it? Did you have any, not theoretical approach, but technical concept or idea behind that?
That's very interesting, because your question reminds me immediately of Milos Forman's The Fireman's Ball.
Yeah.
And when he shot that film, his good friend TOP Miroslav Ondřiček, he asked to paint the walls black for the interiors in the fireman's fire station, where the party is taking place. And it looks so incredibly beautiful with the actors' faces and the black walls in the background. But that's a Czech film. When I make my films, I'm rarely interested in changing the way places look, other than furniture or decor, which is supposed to connect with characters' lives. So I don't have a problem with white walls, because that's how Brazilian homes usually are. You might get a room which is blue because somebody thought it would be nice to have it blue, or maybe brownish, but walls are mostly white, and I actually think they can look very interesting, also with people's faces and clothing. But I usually, Bacurau is a different case, because Bacurau is a Western, and it's a genre piece, and we could go a little wilder with Bacurau. But anyway,
in terms of production design, you mean, right?
In terms of production design and things you see in the film, but still the village, all the houses are mostly white. Maybe a couple of them are light blue, which is completely fine. But I was all right with the way they looked in terms of the color. Thales Junqueira, the art director, he made some interesting changes to some of the facades, but they were still white, because that's how it is, But I think of Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter, when he paints the whole village red. That's really interesting. But that's another film, and it's a very frightening horror film in a way.
Of course. No, but I think it's I like how you defend that, because for me, you see, and when I think of your cinema, then I see that, and that's a singular image that it's. And I remember very much in Aquarius watching it at that time in the official screening, and this light, the sunlight actually of the film, was so powerful in what the film was saying. Anyway, that was great, Kleber. I really enjoyed talking to you.
It was amazing to talk to you, and always to see you, and I wish you have a great set of decisions for your jury.
Thank you. See you both either in Cambodia or in Bordeaux, right? Or in, and I still dream to go to Recife one day, but eventually it happened.
Yes, it will happen.
Thank you.